All right, so this is a cut Scrat scene from Ice Age 5. Ice Age 5 is the one where Scrat finds a UFO spaceship and launches himself up into space and causes all sorts of chaos amongst the cosmos. And when I first got onto the project, I sat down with the directors, and one of the things we did was we basically wrote out a whole list of really funny, silly things that Scrat could interact with in a spaceship. And one of those was a sort of holographic chamber where Scrat could sort of interact with all the planets around him, the moon, the sun, the earth. And also that could be an opportunity to see how what Scrat does up in space would affect Manny and Sid and the pack on their adventure in comedic ways, obviously. And so this is what I had come up with for that prompt, the holographic chamber. So this is cut Scrat scene from Ice Age 5, haplessly holographic. So we start on the outside of the spaceship, and we see the acorn, which had been jettisoned outside the ship in the previous Scrat sequence, floating around the spaceship, and then we hear boing, boing, and we see Scrat trying to follow it from inside. He's boing, bouncing up in all the windows, and then we come to the bigger window, and we see some sort of green table there, and we hear and Scrat climbs up on the table, and he's longing for the acorn that's outside the ship. But as he stands on the table, his feet activate this interactive tabletop. And then outside the ship, we see that same green energy kind of opens up into a big sphere, and a giant scanning beam comes out and scans all the surrounding areas and all the planets. And then it opens up on the table, and it starts to build the world, the universe that it's all around him. And of course, Scrat gets scared by all this. But what it does is it creates everything like almost like a tabletop game that was out and around the spaceship. So all the planets, the acorn, and of course even the UFO that Scrat's in. And he looks around, and then finally he sees it's the nut, but it's the holographic nut floating on the tabletop. And of course he runs over, and he can't grab it because it's holographic. His hands just keep going through it, and he screams, and dives right through it, and his hands go right into this conveniently placed glove box, and it pops into these gloves, and then opens with a little bit of sci-fi flair. And he looks at these gloves, and then they light up, and this energy comes out and sort of connects to all the planets and all the items that had been holographically created. What is going on? He thinks. Bong! And now when he bonks his head, it actually moves the moon. So we see it outside the window. It moves. And then we go outside the spaceship as the moon actually moves, and it heads towards the Earth, and it starts to pull up the tides with the gravity force. And this is where we would cut to Earth, and we would see maybe Buck parting the seas. I part the seas! And it magically parts because of Scrat was moving the moon. And then as he cut back, and he just bumped his head on the moon, and bong, he bunks into the sun. And it falls off the table. And then we cut back to Earth, and the sun goes down. Instantly nighttime, everything freezes. Sid, Manny, and Diego all get stuck in ice. And we see Scrat picking up the holographic sun, and it's burning him. And he throws it. And then we see back to Earth. Light, nighttime, daytime, evening, back to night. And he's blowing on his fingers. And he looks up, and there's the nut, and now that he's got the gloves, he can actually grab it. And he goes and he walks by 2 planets, and he pushes them out of the way. We cut outside, and the planets just fly away from the spaceship. And he grabs the holographic nut. This time he can hold on to it, but we cut out and we see the nut flies towards the spaceship as he grabs it. And he's so happy he's got his nut, and the nut outside the spaceship moves too, but then he realizes, and he sniffs it, and something doesn't smell right about it. It's a holographic nut. It's not the real nut. But as he does that, the nut outside the ship moves again. And he looks outside, looks back at the holographic nut, pulls it in, it moves, pushes it out, it moves, and he realizes, and then he sees the spaceship that he's in, and he grabs it, and he takes the nut, and he smashes it through the window. And he looks out, and it flies through, smacks him in the face. And his gloves get popped off. And then we see he gets flung out of the holographic chamber. And he's bouncing around, crashing into all the sides of the spaceship. And then he crashes back into it. And he resets all the planets. And they would reset perfectly. Everything on Earth with Manny and Sid would go back to normal. And then we cut back in. But he's finally got the real nut from outside the spaceship. But then he goes, huh? And he notices the little spaceship that had been created on the holographic chamber. And he looks inside, and from his POV we see, a little holographic Scrat. He's, oh, that's weird. And he goes to touch himself, and then this giant finger comes in and squishes him on the head, and the nut goes out, doink, 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 no! And we see this giant Scrat hand that had been poking through the top of the UFO from the holographic chamber. The end. The nut got away again. So that was that. Hope you enjoyed it.